All right, everybody. Don't feel any kind of dread at all. So let it all go. Just let it all go. I have passed out my information to everybody. Everybody should have a business card. If not, I've got some here. And for those of you on Zoom, we'll make sure that you guys have my contact information. So if you're feeling any angst when you get started grant writing, please holler at me and I will help walk you through whatever you're going through at that moment, okay? So let's talk a little bit about ourselves. Okay, who here has ever written a grant? Got a couple with some experience, good deal. All right, let's see. Now, why do you want to grant write? Stay near the mic, sorry. So anybody want to share what their motivation is for being here?
I'll share. I'm online.
Go ahead.
So I live in DeQueen, and I opened my own private practice back in April, and I got a UEI number so I can apply for grants to help provide mental health services in our community for those who can't afford it.
Oh, that's great. That is amazing. Do you have any experience with writing grants?
No, ma'am.
Well, you need to get your my contact information and just holler at me anytime that you run into snags, or if there's something that you just need me to sit down with you and kind of work through on. Some of those grants can be quite daunting because a lot of it is scientific because of your field. So there's a lot of terminology there that's going to be very, very specific to your field. So just holler at me if you find you get into a place that you're confused.
Thank you.
Anybody in the audience care? So she was just sharing about how they're with the Hope Evening Lions Club and they want to write grants for food insecurity. Is a very hot topic and it has been for at least the last 10 years. So there's lots and lots of grants out there for what you want it for. So that's a good thing. It's hard to be in a niche that there's not much funding for. Anybody else? Any questions? Yes, ma'am? Okay, what's yours? I'm interested in starting a company. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. Lots of medical grants out there. Yeah. We'll have to talk about some specifics when we get a chance. Okay. All right. So that's a little bit about our audience. Okay. So where do you guys work? Hospitals? Educator? Yeah. Yeah. Anybody else want to share?
Nonprofit sector.
Very good, very good. So we've got some nonprofit sector, which is where I come from. We've got medical, we've got educators, and we've got nonprofits. Oh, and emergency management. A lot of there's lots of money out there in emergency management these days. So that's something to keep a thought on. So I'll tell you a little bit about me. Obviously, I'm a grant writer. I am not a grant teacher per se, but I have very good friends at Hempstead Hall, and they're like, will you please teach a class? Please teach a class. And I'm like, okay, I could grant speak all day long. So here I am sharing with y'all. So just remember that I'm not some professor. I'm a lay person. I've been in the field for a really long time. I've been a nonprofit director since 2002. So I have however many years experience that is. I'm not going to count that out loud, but I've been in the field for a long time. I've seen it grow tremendously in just the amount of years that I've been involved, and it has changed a lot over those years. So, and I work in it still every day, so I will be able to keep you kind of up to date on some of those things that are happening right now in the grant writing sector. So one thing about me is I am also an artist. I love to sketch. I love to paint. I dabble in just about everything there is except for watercolor. And it's because I like to have control over things. In watercolor, I cannot seem to grasp any kind of control over that water. So I do it when I have to, but not when I don't. So that's one thing about me that is never going to change. Love it, but it's not going to change. Okay, so one thing we're going to do is we're going to have a broad overview of grant writing, what it kind of looks like, the nuts and bolts. So a lot of the advice I'm going to have for you guys are the things that I have learned from just being in the field and actual grant writing for all these years. So we're going to talk a lot about that stuff. So I'll kind of interject and kind of give you little tidbits. Now, a lot of the stuff that I do include in the manual and the handouts are also just those things that I have learned. Like some of those forms are going to be my forms that I developed for myself to keep myself in check. Okay. So because grant writing is a very wide field, very wide field. So we're going to talk about the basics. The basics will cover, like you think, each one of the different fields that go into grant writing. Okay, and we'll take a look at those all separately. Sometimes they're going to commingle, so you're going to see a little bit of lapping over, and that's okay. Unfortunately, that's just how it goes. Okay, so then we're going to talk about the search. So one thing that I will harp on from now until our very last session, it'll probably be my last breath out of the last session, is your statistics. They're very, very important. So we're going to spend a good section of our time looking at how to get statistics and how to use them. Okay. If you're not a statistics person, oh, sorry, I jumped. If you're not a numbers person, you're going to struggle really hard with the statistics, okay? But stick with it, stay with it, and you'll get there, okay? So the other one was the search. We are going to look for grants, okay? I'm going to show you what sites to go to look for grants. I never ever recommend just a straight up Google search. You're going to go down a very bottomless pit of searching. So what I always suggest is start with a few good sources and then branch out from there. So we'll talk about that. And then we'll talk about statistics, which is going to be everybody's least favorite thing, but it is so very important to have good numbers. Okay. So then we're going to talk about all the pieces. Okay, so what are the individual parts that we're going to have to pull together to make this grant narrative? Okay, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the process. You know, how do we take all those pieces and put them together? It's going to look different for just about every grant that you're going to write. Okay, so be prepared for that. Have lots of folders and stuff that you can keep together because they're all going to be different. We're going to talk a little bit about follow-up. What do we do after we receive the grant, or what do we do if we don't receive the grant? Okay, so there's some etiquette things that we'll talk about that are really important. And then we're going to work on what I call is a one-pager. Okay, so that'll be fun at the end. I love my one-pagers. They're extremely hard to write, but I love them. Okay. So any questions before we just kind of jump right in there? Okay, so I figure we'll probably take a break in maybe about 6:15-ish. Probably take a little bit, just enough for everybody to kind of shake their legs and get up and move around. All right, so let's talk about budget. That's our first term of endearment. Did you catch that? All these terms that we're going to love and hate at the same time as everything else about grant writing. I'm not going to sugarcoat anything for y'all, so please don't get discouraged because I straight talk it, because I mean, it is what it is, and it's going to be there. And when you get to writing some of your grants, you're going to know. You're going to find that out. Okay, so budget. We all live on a budget somewhat. Some of us, it looks different, our budgeting. Some people might sit down with ledgers and keep up with all of their different accounts. If you're in my age bracket, we just kind of run with it. The younger kids than me, I don't know how they budget, but anyway. So when we think about budget, we think about our own personal budget, writing checks, how much money do we have in the bank and stuff. But the budget that you're going to be working on for your grants is much broader in the sense of budgets. Okay. So essentially what you'll be creating for your grants is just going to be a snapshot of what your organization or your entity is operating on. Okay. And if you're with any kind of nonprofit, business organization, you should have a budget that is approved by your board if you're a nonprofit every month or every year. So you should be able to easily access those if you need to. Okay, so that budget is just your big snapshot, and we'll talk more about that in depth. So evaluation, unfortunately, our grant funders want to know that you're going to be responsible with the money that you receive. So part of your grant ask is always going to be, how are you going to evaluate your effectiveness? Okay, so that is one of those things that you need to be thinking about before you jump off into grant writing. Do you have a means for evaluating? If you don't, you need to create one. And it's okay to create it as long as you live by it. So if you're already doing something that may not be down on paper, then just put that process down on paper. Okay. All right, so foundation. What is a foundation? Well, there's no difference between a foundation and a nonprofit organization. Okay. The only thing that is different is a check box on their IRS filing. Okay, so it's either we're going to give away funds or we're just going to accept funds, essentially. Okay, so it's really just that designation as far as the feds are considered it. So the one type of nonprofit organization is a foundation that takes either funding that is gathered from other sources, fundraisers, whatnot. It could be family money, it could be corporate money, and then they are tasked with specifically giving that money away. Okay, so the IRS documentation that I handed out earlier is one of those things that we're going to look at for you guys to be able to find foundations to send a request for grant monies to. Okay, so their whole source of being is to give away money. So if that's what their purpose is, we're going to be asking for it. Okay, so just keep that in mind, that is their whole goal, is to give away a certain amount of money every year. Okay, so we're also going to be talking about funding sources. So funding sources for nonprofit, let's just say nonprofit organization could be many different things. They can get money from fundraisers. They can get money from corporate sponsorships, all different kinds of ways. So all of these different ways that money flows into your entity is a funding source, okay? And that grant that you're writing is going to want to know your funding sources, okay? So if you got to get creative to really bring out all those highlights of your organization. That's something we'll kind of talk about later, but that's what funding sources are. Really important when you're looking at viability. So grantor, grantee, the person giving the money is your grantor. The person receiving money is your grantee. So you as that entity, you are the grantee, okay? And your funders, your foundations are your grantors. Okay. So IRS determination letter, if you don't have that for your entity, then I would suggest you go ahead and locate that documentation and get a copy of it, okay? It's all public information, so there should be no reason for you not to be able to get it. But if you're not able to find it, we might be able to go on the IRS website and pull it down for you. It just depends on how long ago it was awarded. The really, really old ones are not on the IRS page, but very important information. You will almost have to submit that with every single grant that you do. So very vital piece of documentation, and usually a copy will suffice. Okay. Narrative. So what we're doing in talking about all these different little parts and what grant writing really is, grant writing is a narrative. Okay, so you're putting forth a story of your entity to a body that is looking at doing funding, and you're giving them all the information that they need to make a decision about whether they're going to give you money. Okay, so it's all a long story. Hopefully one that flows well. Sometimes it's hard on some of these grants to make them flow really well, but really you're just telling a story. Okay. Nonprofit. So a nonprofit organization is sometimes tax exempt. Sometimes they're not tax exempt, but it is an organization, entity that does not seek funds for profit, for gain. So we don't want to see a nonprofit that's gaining money every year, not spending it out on services. Okay. And that's something that we need to look at and kind of think about when we're in our budget, because we don't need to seem like we're receiving a bunch of money but not spending it on services as well. So there needs to be a good balance there. Okay. Nonprofit is also referred to as a 501c3. And there's different classifications under that, and that just depends on what you actually do as an organization. But typically, if you're grant writing, you need to make sure that they're going to fund a 501c3. Okay. And if you're not a 501c3, and not all, especially medical, the medical field, not all organizations are going to be a 501c3. They're going to fall somewhere in there, but most will always be covered by a lot of the grantors out there. Okay. Okay, problem statement. This is very important, because this is why you're writing your grant. It's because you got a problem that you're trying to solve. Okay, it's going to be different for everybody. Everybody's going to have their own thing, and that's okay. But this is the reason why you're asking for money. So knowing what your root problem is going to help you, for one, start, just to get started. But it's going to be very important, because that's one of those key things that funders look at. They want to see, okay, yeah, they want to see all this other stuff, but that's kind of ancillary to what is their problem? How are they going about solving it? It doesn't mesh up with what we want to fund. Okay. So qualifications, that's going to be something else that you're going to be looking at your frontline services staff, your program staff. They're going to want to know about them, all the way up to your board of directors. Covers everybody. So kind of be thinking about that, knowing possibly having a resume for the people that are going to be involved in the grant ask. I just recently did one for Blue Cross Blue Shield, and I had to include a copy of my resume. So the lead staff person had to send in a resume. So update, 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 attach, you know, so there's lots of things like that. Okay, so here we're going to kind of go back and look at some of these individuals. Everybody has a copy of the budget. Okay, so when you're looking at an overall organizational budget or even a business budget, somewhat similar, you're going to look at what revenue that you have coming in. Okay, what's your income? And then you're going to look at your expenses. But here's a few lines that need to kind of be thinking about. What the revenue source is, or your funding source. Okay. What is the project totals there? Okay, so we're looking at a project or a program as far as what is that total money there on that line item. So they're saying, like, for grants, they're going to get $46,000 in grants for the upcoming year or the year that they're in. Okay. So then, whenever you're doing a specific grant request, your budget for that grantor will go in your last line. Okay, so let's just say in my Blue Cross Blue Shield grant, I asked for $25,000. Okay, so how am I going to spend that $25,000 is essentially what you're telling them on line item. Okay, you're going to do this in two places. You're going to do it on the grant form, on the budget form, and you're going to do it in narrative form. Okay, so you're going to cover it two areas. Why? I don't know. I guess possibly that they hand the budget off to a finance person. That's the only thing I could think of, but it's going to be every single grant. You're going to send in some type of form with a narrative to go with it. Okay, so same thing with your expenses. You're going to have your expense item, and then you're going to have what it is for your program or your project. So that's kind of like your overall look there. And then you'll have expenses for your grant request. Okay. I've seen a few grants out there that don't necessarily care where you spend the money at. They want to know more of what you're spending on other projects. Okay. All right, so this little line right here, I always bring this out here. So always remember that miscellaneous line. Okay. Only put a miscellaneous line if you cannot do something else with that line item. Okay. Try to make it fit somewhere else. Okay. When funders see that miscellaneous line, it is always a red flag. Almost always. Now, I know that sometimes we do need a little bit of discretionary funding, but make sure you're very specific about what that miscellaneous entails. Okay. Do not make it a big number, please. Whatever you do, put it in supplies, which is always my go-to, like materials, supplies. If I can't find anywhere else to put it, that's where I put it instead of something miscellaneous. Unless I have to get like a license to do something specific, I might put it down there under miscellaneous with an explanation, but try not to do it if at all possible. Okay, so next is the 501c3 determination letter. And they're all going to look like this, even some of the newer updated ones. Let's see, this one was from 2018. So pretty much still the same format of the one for my organization in 1986, I think, is when we became incorporated. So it's always going to have the tax ID number, which is your, in this one, it's employer ID number. And then whether or not the person files a 990, which all nonprofit organizations either do an easy or a full 990. And they are not cheap, y'all. I don't know if you, those things are expensive. Okay, so This letter just has to affirm their nonprofit status, their 501c3 status. Okay. And as you can see there in that first paragraph has got the documentation there. Okay. So that's really all that you need there on that form, is just to make sure that it has the IRS information on it and that that organization is in good standing. You're good to go with whatever you've got. And I've seen different forms from the IRS stating that they're in good standing, and then funders will accept that. Okay, so if you can't get it, you can get a letter from the IRS that says that you're good to go. Okay, all right, so everybody have this handout? I know it's kind of hard to see with the sun. Okay, this one is the proposal project outline sample. We're going to through there real quick and talk about the different facets of the actual grant ask. Okay, so we kind of talked a lot about the stuff that goes on kind of prior to walking into your grant writing activity. It's going to be fun. We're going to believe that, aren't we? Okay, so what's your need? So we talked about problem. So we talked about what that problem is. So we need to not only phrase it like, yes, we got a problem, but we also have this need. So that need comes with a positive spin on necessarily having a problem, okay? And you know that whole adage of you don't bring up a problem unless you've got a fix for it, okay? So if you bring this problem to your grantor, we got to bring a solution to go with it. So just remember that it needs to have a good balance. So yes, we're desperate. We need this money. Like tomorrow, we need this money. But, you know, you got to make sure that you have a good balance there. It can't be, oh my goodness, oh my goodness, oh my goodness. And you get down to the bottom, but they haven't heard anything positive that you're doing. All they're getting from you is the negative side of it. Okay. So always make sure to toot your horn. Okay. So then project description, no matter how much in your mind that you think you know your project, when you get to writing it on paper, it is a completely different level. Like you're going to sit there and be like, oh my gosh, I have no idea what we do. So do like what I do and just make a little bullet list of the things that you do, okay, things that you've got going on within this project and maybe an organization as a whole, and that'll kind of prompt you in your writing, okay? And a lot of times those areas will ask for specific items, so whatever they ask, just answer it, okay? Goals. Every project has to have a goal. It cannot be your overarching goals. Like, you know, we want to feed people, okay? But sure, that's your long-term, you know, goal. What is it for right here, right now? What are we doing right here, okay? So objectives. How are we going to get to our goal? Okay, that's how I always describe that. Your program objectives are your steps to completing your goal of feeding the kids. It's always going to be much broader than that though. Okay, so your methods. How are we going to do those activities? What is that going to look like? Okay. And then who are you going to be doing it with? Who are the people involved? Not just the people, the one-on-one down in the trenches doing the actual work, but the supervisor that's over those people, the supervisor over that person, and it goes on up, okay? Sometimes some funders want to see meticulous detail on people, and then sometimes they don't. They just want to know that there's oversight. There's somebody paying attention, okay? Those are the nice ones, the easy ones. Partnerships. If you are an organization or an entity that makes lots of partnerships and works with people often, my suggestion would be for you to go ahead and get an MOU on file with them annually, so that way you've got it in your hip pocket and you can just send it with every grant that requires it. If not, you're going to be backpedaling trying to get that kind of stuff. So you might think about who the partners that you have already and be ready to start getting some type of formal letter from them. You can do a template. It's not rocket science. They're really just seeing that you have varied partners within the community, okay? And that your organization is not living in a silo. They would much rather give funding to somebody that's going to collaborate with other organizations to really spread their dollars out in our community, okay? And then evaluation. This is another stickler that's really hard to pull together if it's not your mindset. Okay, so if you're the person that's actually on the ground doing the job every day, you're not going to be thinking about these things when you go into your grant writing process. So start thinking about that now before you drive off into your grant. So that's something that you've got that's already kind of in your head, or at least jotted down. So it'll be easier than coming up with it while you're writing. So every activity that you perform in a grant ask needs to be evaluated, okay? Not necessarily do the funders look for anything specific as far as evaluation. They just want to know that you're doing it, okay? So they're not going to come at you and they're not going to grade you down for your process of evaluation, but they want to know that you are looking at what you're doing and you're either weeding out the stuff that doesn't work and encouraging the stuff that does work and that sort of thing, okay? So be thinking about whatever the project is and how you're going to tell the funder, this is how we're going to evaluate it, and know that we are either successful or we're not, okay? Funders aren't going to get in the middle of your organization, but they do want to know that that's on your mind and that you're going to be watching and looking for ways to improve. And then sustainability. It's not such a hot topic these days. I think funders have gotten away some from the sustainability as far as your program being sustainable. And a lot of that is because, you know, funders used to want to give to programs that had long-term programs and projects, just because they knew it had a track record and it was ongoing, and so they felt more comfortable with that. But then, you know, we have instances where we have changes in our society, COVID, one of them. Sustainability has kind of gone out the window because of COVID, just because so many organizations needed money fast during COVID that funders released some of those concerns to get money out to organizations. And I think they're kind of living right there right now. And I think that they know that some programs are extendable and they have a lifetime, that at some point they know that that project's going to go away. We know it's good. We're going to support it now. We don't care about you in the future. You know, this is like a one-time deal. You're going to get money now and you're probably never going to get money from us again. So we really don't care about your sustainability. I mean, that's just what it is. You know, it's kind of throwaway money, you know, like furniture, throwaway furniture. You get it, you keep it for 3 or 4 years, it's really good, and then you chunk it because it was cheap. I mean, you go buy another cheap one because that's, you know, what we do. So same thing with grants and funders. Okay, so we kind of talked about that. Yep, what time are we at? Okay, so we kind of talked about the grants in a broad sense. So what is a grant anyway? It's really just money. That's all it is. It's you're filling out an application, asking this entity to please give you money, okay? It's just really, they send you the check or they direct deposit it. Some people never actually see the physical funds of it. You might see a check these days, maybe, depending on who it is. I know Walmart, their Walmart Gives is completely different monster these days. They have outsourced their grant handling services to another company. So you have to go through this company to get an account. Then you come over here and you register with Walmart. It's a deal. So anybody looking for a Walmart grant, I can help you on the side. Okay. But it's a process. So essentially, they actually cut you a paper check these days. I don't know why. They never used to do that. Anyway, so it's really just money. Okay. And if you think of it as just money, then the whole writing process is, it's okay. It's okay. We got it. Okay. So that is a grant. What does a grant actually do? It provides funding for your projects. Okay. So there's one thing that we kind of need to think about, and I just want this on your mind as we go through, that there are two, sometimes three, facets of, hold on, let me think of what I'm trying to say here. Okay, of your budgeting, your organizational budgeting. Okay, so you should have a budget that is for your whole organization. Okay, it's that big, broad, big, okay, big numbers. We're going to believe that, big numbers. And then you're going to have your project. Okay, your programs are going to be in a subset of that. Okay, so that's really kind of what we're looking at. We're going to be looking at a lot of grantors are going to want that overarching. I had to send one in that was my organizational budget, but I also had to do your project budget as well. So, so be thinking about that. But when we're really focusing our numbers on are our programs, okay, not so much our larger overall budget. So just think about that, because you know you've got your big budget and then you've got one for each one of your programs. And they need to be separate when you're start grant writing, okay? Unless you're writing a grant for multiple projects in one, okay? So if you're a small organization and you want to lump together, let's just say community education, presentations, that sort of thing, you want to kind of clump some of that together. That might be about one project. I would be careful kind of doing more than one project with one grant ask, unless it's something that does cover multiple fields as a project. Okay, that can get a little dicey, but that would be my recommendation. Okay, so what does a grant do? It pays for your services and your expenses. There are very few grant funders out there that will do overhead. Okay, so our overhead is our rent, our utilities, sometimes our administrative salaries, unless it's involved in a program. Okay, so if you need to include, you know, you've got, let's just say, a finance person, you know, that does multiple jobs, and we know that they spend a significant amount of time on this project. Well, then you take whatever their gross salary is and the time that they would spend on that project, you figure out your percentage, and that's what you would include in the grant. Is everybody okay with that? Okay. Okay. Who are grants for? Organizations, nonprofits. Also, they, let me go back for a second. Let's see, nonprofits, individuals, some individuals like artists. It has to be a kind of a niche thing for individuals. You can't just go to a foundation and say, I need money. It would be really great if we could do that, but we can't do that. But a lot of the foundations will be specific about who they're going to give to. Some are absolutely, it's a 501c3 or nobody. Some of them are school districts or nobody. And it's all over the park there. Okay. Okay, winnable grants. Whoa, did I do that? I must have done that. Sorry about that. Okay, so winnable grants. These are some of those kind of tips that I would give to you about winning your grant. You need to be clear and concise about your project. Okay, not only do you need to be clear, but they need to be able to take a fork and eat it one forkful at a time. Okay, don't give them everything all up front. Okay, don't overpower them. Clear and digestible. You need to be able to hand that to anybody on the street, and they need to be able to read it and understand it. So layman's terms, as much as possible. Now, for those of you in fields that require specific terminology, then make sure and explain it. You're going to have to, unfortunately, stop what you're doing and explain it at that time. When you're working with word counts and character counts, if you can avoid it, avoid it like the plague, but these days it's really hard. And word counts will kind of get you here, because if you've got especially big terms that have to be explained, you're going to eat up a lot of characters or word counts on those specific things. So be mindful of that some grants are not and never ending. You can write as much as you want, and you can't write as much as you want these days. Our foundations and our grantors are busy people. Some of them are volunteers that serve on foundation boards. Some of them are not. Some of them are compensated, so it's okay if they have to take time out of their day to go read a grant ask, but some of them are not. And we need to make sure that we get our ask in front of them and we keep them there, and them having to look over a bunch of terms that they don't know anything about is going to set you aside in the do not fund pile, because they just don't have time. They have to find a way of weeding people out. Okay, so make sure you explain any kind of jargon. That try to avoid jargon if you can, unless you have to put it in there. So make sure you're thinking outside of the box. I know a lot of times, even people that are familiar with grants and have read a grant maybe, or have participated in collecting information for grants, can really get narrow-minded and not think outside of their box of their field. Okay, so make sure you're stepping outside of your box, that is your field, whatever it is, and look at it from the outside looking in, okay, and see if you understand it and are able to grasp it, because that funder has probably read 15 to 50 other grant narratives from other organizations very similar to yours, because they're all going to be kind of grouped together, and you want to stand out. And the way that you stand out is thinking outside of your box of your program. Okay, look at it with fresh eyes. Have somebody else sit down with somebody completely random and get their feedback about what you do. Okay, and then talk to your your counterparts about thinking outside of the box. How can we look at this a little bit differently to put our spin on it to make it more interesting? Okay, right with research. Don't kill me yet. This one goes with stats. Make sure that you sound very knowledgeable of your field. Okay, and one way of doing that is using your statistics and research. Okay, I use Google Scholar. I don't know if everybody knows about that, but it is a feature on that Google gives, and it is pretty much just a database that you can go and search any type of research-based reports. Okay, so I've looked under all kinds of things in just my grant career, anything from children with disabilities to healthy living to art. I mean, there's a wide range just right there in my one hand. So you can imagine of everything that you can pull off of Google Scholar. Now, not all of those research reports are going to be for free, okay? So there is a little trick on Google Scholar. I'd have to go back and look at it, but there's a way, there's like a link or something that you can see on the ones that are free, and those are the ones you can click on and get a copy of the report. So you kind of have to filter all that other stuff out, even though there's some really good stuff in some of those other ones, but they can be very expensive to print off. Yes, ma'am.
Like as far as kind of like demographics, statistics information, per se about different.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll talk about that at our next, we're going to go in depth and I'm going to show you some as well. Yeah. So the question was, what about, like just our regular demographics, age, sex, poverty, that sort of thing. We will talk about that next week and we will go in depth. So that way, because that's one of the things that if you guys don't know where to look for that, you're not going to be able to find everything that you need. So we're going to cover that with great detail. Okay. So, and then anytime you can, right with your research, use that as a means to make your proposal stronger. And then make sure that everything that you start in the beginning of your grant goes through all your process and all of your ducks match up. Because we don't want to start out at A and then go to B or C that's way over here and then crossing back over to another letter. We don't want them all over the page. We want to take them through a storyline, okay, essentially, okay. Make sure that you're telling the story, okay. It's important to start your story over here and get it all the way to the end fluid. I mean, we've all read those books where they kind of start out one area and then they kind of take you to left field and then they want to try to get your attention back into it. And then, yeah, so don't do that. Listen, we're not going to do that. And then winnable grants will always show community impact. Okay, so it's not necessarily about your people that you serve. I mean, it is, but it's also the people around your people that get served. So it's that kind of that second tier of people that may not be in your program, but they may be affected by your program. So it might be the parent of the child that's coming to services, or it's the child that's getting food from the food box. How is it affecting that child as well too? So that community impact is very, very important. So a few other things I want to backtrack on for just a second and kind of go over. So I'm going to be on page 5. So just looking at some statistics from the grant world, the Department of Health and Human Services, which is one of the largest grant-making federal organizations, I would say, yeah, health is probably the highest. They offer more than 100 different federal grants. So there's plenty out there for everybody, I promise you. Now, and you guys will hear me tease a lot about federal grants, and they are no joke. No joke. Absolutely no joke. They're very, very difficult. And why? I don't know. So the average nonprofit spends 200 hours writing a single federal grant application. I can see this. I can absolutely see this. I know that a lot of the freelance grant writers charge extra for federal grants just because of how much time, how time consuming they can be. And that also depends on how organized organization is as well, but it can take a really long time. Always start on that one way in advance. Okay, so let's see, I think that's it. I wanted to go on to bottom of page 5, respond directly to your proposal prompts. So make sure that when when you print it out, and I would recommend printing out your grant ask, whatever the foundation RFP, which is their request for proposals, RFP. Okay, that's that little notification that goes out. Hey, we've got our grant cycles open this week or over the next month. You need to come apply. So just make sure whenever you get that printed out, go over it with a fine-tooth comb so you know exactly what is expected from you before you get started. So that way you can anticipate those needs as you go on. Because if you don't do that, I guarantee you, you're going to get to the very end, you're going to get ready to submit, and under attachments, it's going to want you to attach something that you haven't done yet. So make sure to look through all of that before you get started writing, because I guarantee you it's going to be in the back of your mind and you're going to not forget it, okay? If it asks you a very simple question, answer just that question. Don't give them any information that they're not asking for right there, okay? I will guarantee you there will be at least 2 other places that they're going to ask you for that exact same information. So you're going to have to tweak it a little bit when you're putting it in the other section. I just got done writing a grant. I think it was the Blue Cross, and it was just like, are you kidding me? How else can I say this? I already had to say it twice. Now I've had to say it for a 3rd time in a different way. So frustrating when they do that. I hate that overlap, but it's there for some odd reason. We talked about having your clear sense of purpose. We were kind of talking about that organization, you know, wanting to do something in their community. They want to do some of this, some of that, some of this, some of that. And, you know, having that clear focus in mind will be very helpful, because if they were to sit down and do a grant ask right now, it would kind of be all over the place because everything they want to do is different. Okay. So just thinking about that, you know, offer a vision for the project, including the community, and that would be great. Also measuring your resources, very important. What do I have to pull from? Do I have any partnerships I can put as a strength? And, you know, do we partner really closely with somebody else that can help with a piece of the project that I can't do? That looks really well to funders. Okay. Let's see, we already talked about all that. Okay, so private grantors and grantees, we talked about. Private foundations are just that same nonprofit where they just are responsible for giving away money. Corporate grants are earmarked from a corporation into a foundation. Okay, so they take these funds, however this corporate entity has decided to put funds into this account. Sometimes it's, you know, residual funds, maybe from a, you know, a patent or something like that. They'll take extra funding and put it over into a foundation. So you can pretty much look at, there's been very few businesses, there's one in town that I'm not going to say, that does not have information of a foundation as a part of their business entity. McDonald's, Burger King, Walgreens, I'm trying to think, everybody in town, AutoZone has a foundation. Dollar General does literacy. Walmart. I'm trying to think of the other ones that I've searched in town. Sherwin-Williams has a foundation, kind of. So just go and look at when you're driving through town. I keep telling myself I'm going to do this. When you're driving through town, take you a little notebook or do some voice memos on your phone, since you really shouldn't be writing and driving at the same time. That's just what I would do. I'm old school. Give me a notebook. So anyway, you know, when you're going through town, just make note of those bigger businesses that you have in town. They're going to have some sort of a foundation. All the banks have foundations. Now sometimes they handle their money more in-house, so they may not have an official foundation page. Some of them do. Some of the bigger conglomerations, financial institutions will have a foundation. So that's going to be a good place for you guys to look at corporate grants. Okay. Now, not all corporate foundations are going to give to everybody and anybody. A lot of them have very specific things that they're going to grant. Okay. One I know from town, Union Pacific, they have like 3 things. They do like community revitalization, which is not one that I would think of. They also do like trades and skills, and then something else. They have 3 features that they focus in on. So, and all foundations are going to be like that, whether they're corporate or whether they're private foundations. And then government grants, which, you know, they say city and local municipalities. I've not seen that around here. I've lived in the South for a while now, and I haven't seen much of that. Maybe in different parts of the country that's a thing, but I don't think that's a thing around us. Of course, we do have state grants though. So if you think about that, any type of that, you know, township type thing would be considered a government grant. Okay. So some of the exclusions you're going to have to be really careful about is if you are a religious organization, I hate to say very few, because that's in the grand scheme of things, you know, you're looking at a wide opportunity for non-religious organizations to be funded. And so religious organizations are going to be over here in a very tiny pot. Okay, so think of it like that. It's like the rest of the nonprofit grant making world is over here in this pot, and then our religious entities are over here. And that's because a lot of those funders want to make sure that nobody is excluded from their funding and their services and the money that they give out. So they choose not to fund religious activities. So, but that does not mean to say that there's not foundations out there that will not fund those things. They will, and they are out there. That it just takes you a little bit longer to find them. Okay, so there is still hope. Don't believe that it's hopeless. There is some out there for those individuals and groups. And let's see, we've talked about individuals and then tax organizations, firefighters, first responders, schools. They're out there like galore. Okay, let's go on. Any questions? I know I'm kind of rolling fast, but I want to make sure that everybody is following me. Did we have any questions over Zoom?
Will this presentation be available to
I do believe that
playback?
Yes, I do believe that they are recording it, and it should be able to be available for playback.
I probably should.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Any questions in-house? No? Okay, so let's talk about engaging proposals. So responding directly to your prompts. So if they ask you which color do you like better, blue or black, then tell them which color you like, blue or black, okay? Clear and concise. Okay, actually, this is everything that we just went over. Okay, let's see if there's anything in here. Project innovation. So making sure, this is the hard thing in the grant writing world these days. So you know, over the years, especially in the nonprofit fields, if you're looking at like service fields, that sort of thing, some of the projects have really been kind of overdone. Approaches to projects have been overdone. And so when funders see a common theme in narratives, they tend to, unless you're really standing out and you're just spectacular, they tend to set those aside because what they're looking for is that innovative approach. Okay, what are you doing differently that your partner down the street is not doing and you're successful at? Okay, so that's your approach. Not necessarily that you're handing out food, you know, one night a week, but you're handing out one night a week with some pizzazz. You know, you're doing, what are you doing extra for that? Okay, that will set you out from the programs that are doing status quo. Okay, and we want to make sure that everything that we do, we show that we're trying to take that extra step. Okay, so showing how you're different from your field and the way other people are doing it in your field will be a bright shining sticker on the top of your proposal. Okay, so just think about that. Of course, research. Okay, so we've talked about our private foundations, our corporate grants, government grants, and there's others. There are some individuals actually out there that will do grants. I can think of one here locally. We have an organization that writes a larger grant to get funding to sub-grant out locally. So, so there are other entities out there that actually do it. Now, when you do that sub kind of pass through, it's a whole lot easier to write those type of grants than it is to write the big grant to get the big money. But there are other things out there, other ways of writing grants and getting money. Okay, so typically, you know, nonprofits, or I would say nonprofits, and I don't know what you would consider like hospitals and hospice and mental health centers, that whole, there's so much money right there. I would say nonprofits in like the medical field is probably the largest portion of the population that get grants, unfortunately. Yeah, so that's a very good question. Usually, let's just say I write this year, and for some odd reason, they just loved my narrative. They just, oh, you're just great. We're just giving you money this year. Okay. For writing to a foundation the first time won't necessarily get you a firm no the first year. Okay. It depends on where they're at in their funds. And I'm going to get back to this, and here's why. So, so they look at that and they, I've lost my train of thought now. Trying to get back to the whole, I'm just going to have to segue back into answering your question because I don't know where I was at. Okay, so depending on the funding source, probably not going to get funded the first year unless you're a standout. Okay. That doesn't mean that you can't get picked up your first time, but you know, it just, yeah, you have to build up a relationship with the foundation. Okay. Which completely sucks because that first year you're going to be writing your heart out and you're just going to be, I know I knocked it out of the park. But yeah, sometimes that doesn't happen. So anyway, most of the time they're going to give you a 1 to 2 year limit. Okay. A limit on, okay, I got funded this year, so now I cannot reapply for 2 years. Okay. Almost always going to be a layout of a year. Okay. Almost always. Sometimes it's 2 years. It just depends on how much funding the entity has. Okay. So if it's something that they're doing regularly, you know, and this is just something that they do, then it's probably just going to be a year set out. Okay. Some are more than that. I've seen some that are 3 to 5 years of reapplying, but if you don't get it your first year, well, you're going to reapply until you get it. Okay.
Is like group A and then like organization B, or you receive 2 grants at the same time.
No. Almost never. Okay. Yeah. Unfortunately, they're gonna figure that out real quick, and somebody is not gonna get funded if you're writing for even if you're the same entity. Yeah. So, but that's a very good question. So usually when you win, you get that year that's coming up, and then you set out a year. Okay. So unfortunately, and some don't care, some don't have stipulations, so you can write to them every year if you want to, even after you just got money. But most of them are going to put some type of time frame on when you can reapply. Okay. Let's see. Do we have any? Okay, so what am I looking for? So the big thing that you need to be looking for is the funding interest of the grantor. So the foundation or the corporate entity, whoever you're writing to, what are they looking for? What is their purpose for being? Okay. So, we know that nobody just wants to go out and start a nonprofit and give away money. I'd love to, that'd be so great. But they're usually out there with a purpose. Okay. They're going to have a mission statement. They're going to have a vision statement. You need to know all of these things about who you're writing to. Okay. Because that's going to be one of the things that we talk about is knowing your audience. Who is going to be reading your narrative? Okay. So we don't want to reach out to a program that only likes to do youth sports. If I do youth art, I don't fit to their interests. They are never going to fund me. It will always be a no, and I'm always going to be wasting my time. Okay. So save yourself some time, make sure you fit. Okay. Now, if you might be on the border line of maybe some of their things, you kind of fit, but you don't fit because you're doing things differently, don't discount yourself out. Pick up your phone and call the foundation director and say, hey, this is what we do. I know we don't specifically fit, but what do you think? Put it in their court. They're going to tell you the honest truth. They're going to say, you know what? We've already been inundated this year. I can tell you it's going to be slim to none. Then you just take that and say, okay, maybe I'll write next year, back away from it. But they're going to be very honest with you about everything that you ask them, except for, are they going to fund you? That's one thing that they will never cop to, but just asking them those questions and finding out is going to be better than spending all of your time writing this fabulous grant narrative to only find out that you got a no because you didn't fit. Okay. And we need to make sure that it hates me. Did I turn it off? Oh, what's wrong? Oh, there it goes. I'm just too fast. So just make sure that what you do fits up with them. Okay. Now, like I said, remember, if you're outside of the box thinkers, you're bringing in all this fun new stuff to this dull, dreary field, call and ask. Make sure, don't discount yourselves. Okay, so geography. Do they actually fund in my area? That's one of the things that I find that is the most frustrating, because you find some of the, you just fit. You just know you fit until you scroll down, you spend an hour investigating this website, and yeah, you're going to spend some time investigating some of these foundations to find out that they don't fund in our area. And that is so frustrating, because you get these great foundations out there that got lots of money, but they don't want to spend it in our geography. A lot of that is in corporate foundations. They're only going to do grants in areas where they have operations. So that's something to kind of think about. So you may see them in Little Rock, but that doesn't mean they have services in Southwest Arkansas. So they may not, they may not. So just have to call and ask. But a lot of foundations and some corporate, a lot of the corporate will have connections on their website to let you know what their service area is, to make sure you kind of click on that and it'll show a map. So that's kind of helpful. Unfortunately, you have to dig for some of that information. What is their budget? How much money do they give away? Okay, we'll talk about that too when we get into the finance portion of it and investigating. Okay, how do I apply? Am I going to be applying by paper? Am I going to be online? Am I going to be held to word counts? Am I going to be held to character counts? So those are all things that you need to kind of look at before you get to writing. I tend to be a rambler, and you'll notice that because I ramble and then I get off track and it's hard to get back. So that has been one of the hardest things for me to learn as a grant writer, is that I cannot write the way that I speak because I ramble. And when I do that, I ramble when I type. So I've learned that over the years. It's been really hard. It's really hard to take a red pen to yourself, but it's just something out of experience that I've learned to do, is just kind of dial myself back, put enough information in to fit, make it work. Okay. If you're not familiar with doing grants online, that is definitely something you need to go ahead and look at before you get started, so that way you're familiar with the process. A lot of times, if I find a foundation or something, even if I'm not sure that I fit with them, I'll go ahead and do a login, because if it's going to be online, you're going to have to set up your own user and all that kind of good stuff. But then that'll give you access to actual submission. So that's very helpful to kind of see each one of those blocks in those areas. And that's when you're going to find out whether or not you're going to be held to a word count or character count. Okay. Is everybody familiar with those, with what those mean? No? Okay. Thank you. Thank you for being honest. Okay. So word counts are kind of what you think they are. Let's just say within a given sentence, we're going to have so many words. Okay, so what funders want to do is they want to cut down on the amount of jargon and all that extra stuff that we're putting in there that they don't need, and making us be more responsible with the way we turn it in. So they don't want any big flowering something. They just want a cohesive picture that is unique of our project. Okay, so word counts means that. Now, in word counts, you do not get dinged for punctuation. So that's the nice thing. Okay, you don't get dinged for spaces in between your words. Okay, when you're working with character counts, that means every single move of the cursor counts. Okay, so that is spaces, that is punctuation, that's dashes, that's everything. Okay. And those I found more difficult than word counts. I mean, I'm down there looking for a shorter, I will get out the thesaurus and look for a shorter word just to get rid of those 3 characters that I need to get rid of so I can be at my limit on this one. And I've done that before. So knowing kind of those things when you get into it, you're going to know. There's one thing that I do. I always type mine out first and then I submit. So that way I at least have something on my computer that is a flowing work that I can kind of flow from section to section. And then I can keep up with my word counts and my character counts before I get to actual submission. But there are a few times, for whatever freak of nature is on their website, I've had to go back and eliminate some characters. So when you get down to the 2 and 3 characters you got to get rid of, you have to be very, very creative. And that's not easy. And once I get to that point, I'm like, I'm using this sentence. I'm not getting rid of a word, and then I have to get rid of something. So anyway, okay. So what do I need? So you need to be specific, meaningful, have an action plan with supporting reasons. Okay, we've kind of hit on some of these already. So everything about your project needs to be specific, and it does need to be meaningful to your audience, to the people that you serve, to your community. And what is your plan of action? Okay, and that will help you when we get into building those objectives and those goals and all that stuff you're not used to doing. Okay, I do not remember if I've added this in, but look up SMART goals. Okay, and that's an acronym for specific, measurable, is it evaluative, actionable, or reachable, reportable? I don't know. But look up SMART goals. They're very smart.
It's specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound, I think.
Yes, yes. And so every time you write a grant and you write your metrics, your measurable objectives, you're going to be writing SMART goals. So you're going to have your goal. You're going to have your time frame in it. You're going to have all your specific information in it. Okay. Now it can get a little wordy, so it's something that you have to practice with. But just print off just a sheet of paper with the SMART goals, you know, what SMART goals are, okay? Just print that off and stick it in your binder. So that way, once you start writing, you can go, okay, let me look at this goal and objective. Do I have all the parts that I need to have in there for it to be SMART? Okay, if it's SMART, you're golden. If it's not SMART, you're not golden. Okay, so make sure you go back to that SMART and look over what you've written and make sure you have all of those steps in there for that goal and objective. Okay. What is your plan, your evaluation plan? How are we going to get our positive results? I'm going to harp on a lot of this stuff just because it is so important. And I know as a person that has come into this world of grant writing, I had no idea any of this stuff. Now, over the last probably 10 years, having measurable objectives is relatively a new idea. So we've expanded from some of those, you know, the funders, oh, we see the same old projects coming through. So now they're trying to challenge the community to give more information and to be more explicative and forcing us to think outside of the box as nonprofit leaders. Okay. So you're going to have to find a grantor eventually to be able to write your grant for, which we're going to work on that next week. Okay, we need to research the funder. I cannot express this enough. If you can also pick up on some of their keywords that they use on their website, explaining about some of the fields that they're interested in, you could possibly pick up some of that terminology and use it in your narrative, okay? It brings back that connection, and I guarantee you they will notice that. Okay, so spend the time. I know it's hard. I know nobody has time for this. Just writing the grant enough is just time consuming. It doesn't include all the stuff that you've got to do to get ready to write the grant and the stuff that comes after the grant. But try to, you know, find some minutes here and there where you can do the research. Making sure that you're reviewing the guidelines closely. Will be your lifesaver. Like I said, just print out that request for a proposal, go over the actual, I've actually gone on the website for online grant submissions. And I've actually just printed out that page sometimes, just so I know, because I don't like to look back and forth. I want to just be in my Microsoft Word and doing my typing thing. I don't want to look at their site all the time. So a lot of times I'll print it off and just keep a copy of that with me or in my my grant folder. So that way I can refer back to it without having to get on my computer. I don't know if that's wasteful of me, but you know, sometimes anything you can do to not distract yourself while you're grant writing is really important, because sometimes you can get off track and go down some rabbit holes when you're doing that. Okay. So what are they looking for from us? They want to be persuaded. That's the biggest thing. They want to be awed by your proposal and like, okay, yeah, I really like them. I want to vote for them to get funded. Okay. They want to see the important program that you have and that it's valuable and it has a valuable cause. Okay. So let's just say you run a stop smoking campaign. You know, what is it about that campaign that makes it valuable? Okay. It's not just the fact that you're handing out these services, but you're changing people's lives and you're saving another generation, yada, yada, you know? Okay. So they want to know who's going to be responsible. Okay. They may not drill it down and want your your on-site staff, the person that's actually going to be working in the program. They may just want to know who's responsible because they're only going to go to that person. Okay. Sometimes, and that is going to be different sometimes, if you're writing a grant for, let's just say your entity, your organization, maybe it's a little bit bigger. It might be that department head that is responsible for this project. It may not be the grant writer. In my case, it is right now because I'm the grant writer for my organization and I'm the person responsible for making sure the program happens. So just making sure of that too, that if it's going to be somebody, whoever's going to be responsible also needs to be included when you submit the grant. Okay. So a lot of times they will give you a spot for who's the responsible person, who's the grant writer. Okay, type situation. Okay, so who is it that's going to be listening to all of our words and everything? So it's going to be the person reading the proposal. Okay, I have never really sat down and spent the extra time to look at board members of foundations, but you know, it might behoove you to see who's on the board, who's going to be reading, what is their background? Do they like technical writing? Do they, you know, is it all lawyers that are going to be reviewing this request? So then I might need to use less layman's terms and a few more official, maybe some more official language there. Okay. And what is their mission and their goals for offering this money? Okay. Do they know what you are interested in? Okay. They have to know that the only information they get is that grant. The only information they get about your organization is going to be that grant proposal. Okay. They don't have time to look up websites. Back in the day now, they did, maybe not websites, but they checked into entities, organizations, whatever that would write to them. They don't have time for that these days. So a lot of times they're going to give you a spot to send extra information like that, but they don't have time to really get into it. So you have to give them all the information you can in that one grant ask. That's your one time to shine before them. So just kind of think about that. This is your opportunity to really put forth that good foot for your organization. Okay. Do they understand my wording? I tend to speak with a funky little accent. I'm not originally from Arkansas. spent time overseas in Virginia and then came back to Arkansas. And so I have kind of that Southern drawl, but with a little spicy something else. So sometimes I don't say words and I don't type words the same that other people do. So you've got to be very careful. Like I said, I have learned I cannot type the thoughts in my head until I get them straight, get them kind of lined out, because if not, I'm rambling all over the place. So do they understand what I'm writing? Okay. And that's where the less jargon, the less terminology we can use, the better for them to understand. We just need to make sure that it's readable and it's understandable. Okay. And what will they find persuasive? That's a good thought. I mean, we don't know them. We don't know if they're hiring out the actual grading of the proposals. So that's kind of hard to know, but we know that they're working for XYZ organization or foundation, so we know what they tend to lean towards, so then we know we can stay in the right lane. Okay, so data. Oh, I know, I said it. Data. That's one way that you can show and you can be persuasive is through your data, using your data. And I can't say it enough. Okay, through your stories, through that story that you're telling them. So, I am always on the cautious side as far as what I'm planning to put in my my grant ask, but there is nothing more powerful than some type of statement that is from an eyewitness, from a patient, from a receiver of your services, to somebody that's prominent in the community, giving a nice little shout out, or a mom, thanking you so much for the food for their child, or the after school program, whatever niche you're in, saving somebody's life with paramedic equipment. There's other little antidotes that you can put in there that's really going to shine, but not put you over your word counts or your character limits. So it's just finding those places where you kind of can put those things in there. Even if you can do it once, that's fine. Just try to find it somewhere that you can kind of put that in there. Good place to hide it would be like in your history. A lot of times, funders want to know the history of your organization. Sometimes they give you a very small amount of space to do that in. If you have enough room, cram it in there. Put a little, touch point from the community about your program in there. Okay. History, they want to know. Well, one of the ways you can be persuasive is your history. So that is your track record. Okay, what have you done in the history of your organization? Okay, have you won any national awards? Have you won a state award? Have you participated in XYZ? That sort of thing. So what is it that makes your company or your organization stand out from your history? So I think it was like 2008 or 2009, I can't remember, maybe 2010. My organization won a very prestigious award, and it's a national award. And so you better believe every history I put has that award in there. That is something that never leaves my narrative unless I can't make it fit as far as like character counts and word limits. So anything that you can do like that. If you have, a state celebrity or something, in your organization working, you can put something like that. But anything that kind of shines you out and places you above everybody else. So make sure that you're thinking about those things when you talk about history. Younger organizations aren't going to have as much of a history. So it's going to be very important for those organizations to be very colorful, not wordy, be colorful in the way that you show your organization, because let's just say you've only been operating for 5 years, is kind of a cringeworthy type thing to funders, especially larger foundations or corporate. They might side-eye it, but they will give you a shot reading through the rest of your materials. If you're on mark with your materials, that you should be okay. Unfortunately, funders tend to be a little bit leery of young organizations without some type of track record. So even showing that you've done the work before you got incorporated would be a way of doing that. Oh, well, we started 20 years before we got incorporated. That's a little bit different. You know what I'm saying? So it's all in how you present your case to the funder. Okay. So history is really important. Okay, where are we at? Oh my goodness. Okay, so what are the expectations? Well, what are the requirements? What are they going to require of you in this grant ask? Okay, do they want a quarterly update? Do they want any kind of documentation from you? There are some out there that just says, go with our blessing, take our money, send in a report at the end of the year. So, okay, what are they going to require? Not only for you to put in there, but through the life of the program that they fund. Okay, because if you can't hold up that end of the bargain, then do not write the grant. Just breathe and throw it away. Walk away. Okay. You also need to be looking for, have they funded anyone like your organization in the past? Okay. If they have funded an organization like yours in the past, how much did they give them? First of all, I want to know that. How long ago was it? Do they fund these programs often? Is this just like a wild hair they funded somebody like me? Kind of look back in that history, and that'll kind of give you a little bit of an idea of your chances here. Okay, and if you are going through this funder, they may say that they're completely open, but they haven't funded a wide variety of organizations. You might be a little bit more hesitant about applying for it. I wouldn't say don't. I would say don't kill yourself trying to apply for it if they've never funded an organization like you before. Okay, I would still try to make it sound wonderful as you can, knowing in the back of your head that you may not get picked up. So, okay. So what about credibility? Are you capable and knowledgeable to be able to pull off this project? You have to be able to show that you know what you're doing and you know how to do it. Okay. Do you have thorough plans? Okay. That will come out in your measurements and your evaluation. If you don't have those two parts that are good and strong, they're not going to see you as credible. Okay. That's why I say, if you don't have these things, go ahead and think about that. Get it on paper somewhere, even if it's in a 3-ring binder somewhere, and just so you have those thoughts and you can build upon that before you get writing. Okay. Okay. So have you had any past successes? Have you been awarded, $50 million grant somewhere and done really well and the funder loves you? Thinking about stuff like that. Okay. Are you committed? Is your organization committed to this? We need to know that if we're going to spend this amount of money, that you're going to be committed to do the things that we need you to do. Okay. So also having partnerships and other organizations and individuals as a part of your team is just going to show you as a stronger applicant. Okay. So if you don't have any partnerships, go form some. Go find somebody. Just grab somebody. Hey, I'm here. Let me know. Everybody's got my information. I'll be your partner. Okay. Okay. So what's the plan? So these are some of the things that I do. Use your headings. They need to be the same headings. that your funder chose. You don't want to jump out there and just create some new ones, because their eyes are going to be looking for the things that they know that they are supposed to have. And if you change that up, they're going to assume it's not there. Okay, even if it's right in front of them. Okay. So make sure you use the same headings. And when I am typing my grants in Word, I use the same headings. Okay. Now, when you do your online submissions, this does not count. You don't have to worry about this. This is when you're turning in an actual paper grant. Boy, when was the last time I did that? It's been a minute. A lot have gone online. So, but I still do it because it's the way I've always done it. And I used to have to turn in paper. I tell you, I remember back in the day, I'm not that old, y'all. I promise I'm not. It feels that way. But I remember we would have to do our original that had to be paper clipped together. And this was like every funding source. You had your original that was paper clipped together. Then you had like 5 copies that you had to make, because whoever's on the review team had to get an extra copy, and then they had to keep the official copy. Okay. And then you had to mail that. You had to put stamps on that and put that in the mail by like a deadline. Yeah, because it had to get to them by a deadline. Yeah. So that's how we used to have to do grants. And I will tell you, there's been more than once that I've driven them from my location to Little Rock, because they were doing Little Rock at a certain time and we didn't get it in the mail. So back in the day, boy, I see this online submission, give me word counts and character limits all day long. If I don't have to drive one to Little Rock, I will be happy. And I've done that more than once. So, and it is so like, one time was pretty recent. Anyway, it was to a state agency that's smaller, that doesn't have an online platform to be able to put it on. And I drove to Little Rock, didn't know where the office building was. It was someplace I was not familiar with. So I'm like, oh my gosh. So I finally walk into the building. Of course, you know, I'm here, Southwest Arkansas. You just walk into any building. So I walk into this building in downtown Little Rock, and there's a security guard. I'm like, he's like, you're here to drop off the grant? Yes, sir. I'll tell him you dropped it off. Are you sure? Could you go ahead and tell them? Can you call them just real quick and let them know I'm dropping it off? Because that's your only proof that it's, you know, so if I would have left it with him and he didn't take it upstairs for me, oh my gosh. Anyway, I ended up getting that grant. But yeah, it was still giving my baby away to the security guard. That didn't help matters at all. Very paranoid. I called them when I got to the car and said, by the way, I dropped it. Oh yeah, he's already sent it up. Okay, thank you. So follow up, make sure on those paper ones, you follow up that they get it. Okay, so make sure that you're following everything that RFP, the request for proposal, whether it's on their website or whatever they say, put in that you're following that to a T, because any wrong slip and they will eliminate you. That's a hard fact. They have to find ways to eliminate submissions. So just make sure that you follow all your highlights and make sure everything is put in. Be direct and to the point as much as you can without the extra. The extra's hard for ramblers. But don't be too skimped. We got to get some details and some life in there. You've got to put some life in there, okay? Don't beat around the bush. Let's get straight to our point. What are we working on? We're working on to feed kids because they're hungry, okay? So this is what we do, okay? Make sure it's uncluttered and concise. Do your very best to kind of look back over, especially when you're copying and pasting. Some things can kind of go wrong if you're copying over here from Microsoft Word and then putting it on their website to submit. Just make sure everything crosses over well, okay? And concise. You don't have to tell them 15 stories. You can tell them one story and that's enough. Okay. Okay. Match what the reader's used to. If you're writing for a technical grant, you're probably going to have to put some technical jargon in there. So just make sure that you're matching your writing for the readers. Okay. The reading should always be easy. Should always be easy to get through your grant ask. Okay, so you guys didn't know you were going to have homework. We're going to have homework for 3 nights, okay? For the first 3 nights, and then we'll work on our final masterpiece on the last day of class. Okay, so I want you to either get your organization's information or come up with an organization, okay? So we want a mission statement. That's simple. No need to get wordy on it, okay? But it has to have a target audience. Who are you going to serve through this program? Okay, so target audience and your location. Okay. Okay. So that is it for tonight. Next week, we're going to be doing the search and stats. My 2 favorite parts. Well, I do like the writing too. I do love to write. Which is good for a grant writer. You gotta like writing at some point. Okay, any questions on Zoom?
Yes. Hey, can you repeat your background and all of the roles that you have serviced in and what you are doing now?
So my nonprofit started with adult literacy, and I was there for 8 years, and then I went into children with developmental disabilities, and that was for a large nonprofit, which is a completely different approach to small nonprofits. So I do have experience in both. So for those of you that are doing that sort of thing with larger nonprofits, I do have experience, so I can help there as well. And then, of course, now I am working with an arts organization. Kind of been all the way around the park. Man, that's crazy. But grant writing is the same. It doesn't matter the field. The same concepts go into just about any nonprofit field.
Thank you, Jennifer. Someone is asking, do you contract with people to help them write grants? And if so, do you have a baseline of what you charge?
Yes, and that's something, if you will give me an email or shoot me an email, I can let you know that. But yes, I do contract on the side. I love it so much, I just can't stop doing it. No, I really do like it. And I like to help other organizations and get other people involved in grant writing. So I like to try to make myself available to help, because everything I've learned has been through going through multiple classes that didn't teach me much, to figuring it out on my own. And so here we are. Any other questions? Okay, I guess we'll adjourn. Is there any in-house questions? I figured they would have known. So here's a very good question. Thank you for asking that. Matching grants. It's the bane of our existence. It depends on the amount that I'm asking for. And if I know I can come up with a cash match with what we already spend. Okay, unless I have discretionary money where I can pull it aside and use it for specifically cash match. Those grants are very, very tricky. So I would proceed with caution, and just make sure that everything that you put in that grant ask that you can provide. Okay, Even if you have to open your pocketbook and write a check for something specific, you know, that's the thing is can you live up to your side of it? Okay? And if that's something that you can do, then definitely go for it, because it's, right now, I know we're all trying to leave. My most recent grant that got awarded was for the National Endowments of the Arts, and it is a cash match. They only, gave us 20, I asked for 25. No, they gave us 10, excuse me. They gave us 10, but it's cash match. So I had to come up with 10,000 in cash. And we don't have $10,000 sitting aside. So, but we do spend money, our own money on some things. And so those are the things that I'm using as match for the project. So it can be done. It can be done. You just have to be careful, and it can be tricky. If you're a small nonprofit, probably need to stay away from it unless you know you have the funding behind it. Okay. All right. See you guys next week. We'll learn more grant stuff.
Thank you.
Did everybody? Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. From Prescott. You know Harding Dion? Harding Dion? Mr. Dion, you know he's an artist, right? We did a gallery show for him last year. He's supposed to be working on some new works for me to do another gallery show for him, but he is fantastic. And the next time next time you see him in town, tell him Jennifer said. Okay. Jennifer from the Arts Council said that he's an artist and you want to see his work. Okay. Okay. He is fantastic.